Rage Badger Gaming here, and we're going to go over the fun Blink Blade class. We haven't had an update on this in such a long time, so it's so good to see that the updates are finally available. We've played this a handful of times. Actually, a few playtesters on the Badger team were able to jump in and test this out, so it's very exciting, and I'm glad that we can talk about it now. We'll be going over all the starters, so be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single video. I've already gone over my thoughts on the Blink Blade's perks, so I'm going to put that in the description. However, let's just get to the cards. So again, we're going to go over just a couple of Blink Blade concepts. There's going to be two initiatives, one on the left, one on the right. If you're in fast mode or slow mode, it's going to determine that. And whether you can go fast or slow will determine by the use of time counters. You always start a scenario with 1, and you can't have more than 5. If you elect to go fast on a turn, all the fast portions of a card get triggered, which are usually almost always better, and then you lose a time counter. So naturally, if you're at no time counters, you must go slow. On the plus side, if you do go slow, you gain a time counter. There are ways to manipulate it so you're not always 50% fast, 50% slow. So that's cool because there are some cards that will give you time counters. Blurry Jab is effectively an attack 2 with Muddle if you're slow, or an attack 4 with Wound and 1 experience. You'll notice that a lot of the cards that give you experience are fast cards. So you have to play cards that give you experience while fast to really level up quickly as the Blink Blade. There's a couple other exceptions that you can get experience while slow, but we'll address those as we get to those cards. So 4 attack and wound and 1 experience is a very nice, solid, non-loss initiative 20 for fast. The bottom half, however, is a nice, see, here's the cool part. Move 2, so it's basically a default, but then you can make an adjacent enemy suffer 1 damage. But if you're fast, it's a move 5. So this one rewards you. It's the slow one's clearly worse in theory. Move 2 is not good, but 1 adjacent enemy suffering 1 damage is a good thing that gives you a little bit of utility. It's not necessarily as good as, say, the Crag cards Rumbling Advance, but it gives you some cards that are more interesting when slow without just feeling like I'm just playing nerfed versions of the cards. They're a little interesting, kind of like the top half Muddles, even though you're at a much worse, literally half the attack value of the fast version. So the fast version of this 5 move is great. This theme will continue to persist throughout all of the Blink Blades classes cards. Twin Strike. This is fun because if you're slow, all it is an attack 1 and then an attack 2, which is pretty weak. However, fast, this card's so fun. Attack 2, move 2, attack 3, and gaining experience. That's huge. It's ahead of the curve. It's such a good non-loss card, and almost all the Blink Blades end up using this for a while. We know we have. Initially, it was attack 2, move 2, attack 2, but it's been bumped up since then, so it's really good to see that this card, which is already pretty solid now, is certainly an improvement. And the bottom half is interesting because you move 3, however, there's modified it. First off, all of your attacks gain Pierce this round, and you infuse Wind, or the downside, instead of moving 3, you only move 1, but then you heal yourself and infuse Earth. So this is another one of those cool parts. Although move 1, heal 2 self is again behind the curve overall, it's still interesting because it allows you to think, how am I going to use these slow cards effectively? So your slow turns are going to be overall lower effort, but how can you utilize the cards that you have to play them effectively? Sap Speed is a nice little cleave 2 attack, which is not great. However, it's slow, you don't get a penalty for it. However, if you're fast, it's a 3 attack with advantage and 1 experience, which is good. It's better than the Brute's Leaping Cleave at that point. The bottom half's also very interesting. You immobilize 1 enemy, and if you're fast, you immobilize up to 3 adjacent enemies, and if you're slow, you get to actually ignore other slow effect penalties this round. So this may actually play to your strengths, because you can play a top half that may penalize you for playing it slow, and the bottom half still allows you to immobilize and still not ignore that benefit. This one's an interesting card that I didn't ultimately use very often, but I can still see the potential. Kinetic Transfer is very interesting. So there's a lot of text here, but what it really reads to is if you're playing as a slow mode, you move 0 and infuse Ice, and then attack 2 at range 2. However, fast infuses fire instead of ice, and it is a melee attack, but with push 3. you get to move 2, attack 2, push 3, and fuse fire, which is overall pretty solid. The bottom half, however, is interesting. We actually really like this because first off, it gives you a move 3 in slow mode, which sounds bad. However, a lot of times you'll want to reposition, and being able to actually move more than 2 in slow mode is actually more versatile than we initially thought when we were first playing the class. So the fast ability, however, is all adjacent enemies and allies suffer 1 damage. So again, this is like Better Rumbling Advance. And here's the cool part. No matter what you chose fast or slow, you can burn a time counter to push everything next to you. Now, if you're in the right position, you can knock a ton of enemies into traps or other stuff. You don't need to burn the time counter. You can just use this as a move 4, all adjacent allies and enemies suffer 1 damage, which is still strong, but this gives you the potential to burn a time counter to cause a lot of damage in the right situation. So Overdrive's top is super fun because it kind of changes how you play a little bit. Always when you're slow, you have shield 1 when you declare slow, which is fantastic, gives you way more durability. However, whenever you're fast, you always jump. There are so many scenarios. The introduction of ice, a terrain type, let's just say that being able to jump is significant. The bottom half is super interesting too. You'll muddle all enemies within range 2, but if it's slow, you muddle on the enemies in range 3. It's another card that actually rewards you for playing it while slow. Muddling all enemies in range 3 in the bottom half is super strong too. Power Leak is another strong card. It's an attack 4, which is good. However, it allows you to make 2 attack 4s at 2 separate targets and gain an experience, which is, again, ahead of the curve for a level 1 card, but it does have the added downside of... So the fast portion of this card, attack 4 or 2 attack 4s if you're not poisoned. You do poison yourself, but you get an experience. 2 attack 4s at 2 separate adjacent enemies in melee is actually really strong for a level 1 non-loss, even if you do poison yourself. In your slow mode, you actually have several ways to heal yourself, so just knocking off a heal 2 allows you to just remove that poison in the first place. 3-2. So the bottom half loss of this is, it's okay. I didn't actually really like it that much. Move 3 and then heal 2 yourself and all adjacent allies doesn't feel really worth a loss. And move 7, I guess I just ended up using it for the top half. But I can see there are situations where the bottom half you'd be like, I need to get over there. Boom, you've got it. Or we need a big healing. There are uses for it. We just didn't encounter them when we tested this class. Hit and run. So this one's actually great when slow anyway, because even when slow, it's just attack 2, immobilize, which is pretty strong. You can move away with your bottom half and then leave enemies helpless. However, in fast mode, attack 3, immobilize, move 2, gain an experience, which is fantastic. This allows you to kind of take an enemy out of the fight. You'll probably need to pair it with a better initiative card because 4171 isn't necessarily optimal if you want to take a melee enemy out by immobilizing them and moving away. But you still have the bottom half to do something very interesting. Additionally, the bottom half's an interesting loss where you actually get bonus move 3s. In some scenarios, this really pays off. For your next 5 attack actions while fast, perform a move 3 as the final part of the action, which actually is pretty significant. I've actually seen other people play this very effectively, but our groups ended up not using it. So if the top half, however, is very strong. Drive Recharge. So this is a significant nerf and buff at the same time. The old Drive Recharge just said gain a time counter. Unfortunately, non-loss gain a time counter at level 1 was a bit too strong. So it's much better, but they added a loss icon. Instead of 1 time counter, you get 2 time counters, and you get ward, and you get bless. Great, however you lose it. So this actually changes dramatically though, because previously you could actually use it where every rest, I get an extra time counter, and it actually changed the Blink Blade's economy, which isn't necessarily bad when you include it later, when you can give up a high level card to get a benefit like this, but at a level 1 card, it was mandatory and everyone always did it. The bottom half is, again, heal 2 or heal 4 self if you're slow. So this is a card that's great for slow, and I know everyone was like, hey, gotta go fast. Sure. Now, that's great. However, you need to actually have cards that are usable while slow, and this is one of my favorites. This one was a must-take for, I forget the highest level we went with the Blink Blade, but we never didn't take this, so I think that should say a lot about the card. Cascading Reaction. Let's talk about the bottom first. So move 4 or move 3 if you're slow, and then if you're fast, all your adjacent allies get to add +1 to their moves for the rest of the round. So first off, move 3 while slow isn't bad, but then move 4 and then the ability to give allies more move is very strong. 1949 initiative is also very great. The top half was very interesting. It's a loss. Basically, don't play this ever while slow. The top half is just not worth it. It's okay when slow, but it's great when fast. Attack 3, wound 1 experience. Move 3, attack 3, wound, gain 1 experience. Which is huge because with the wounds, even with just drawing zeros, this is 8 damage, potentially more, plus some mobility, which clearly puts it ahead of a level 1 loss when you consider that. Potentially more than 8 damage when you consider it. So I'm a big fan of this card, especially when you compare it with other bottoms that really put you in positions or give you pierce like Twin Strike. Temporal Displacement. It's a top half loot, but if you're fast, you get to move 2 before, which makes it very good. In the bottom half, attack 3, which I'm a huge fan of. It's only attack 2 when slow, but it's a ranged attack. So attack 3, range 3 when you're fast. Ultimately, this is another one of those great cards. I love Temporal Displacement. Experimental Adjustment's pretty great, getting into the level X cards. First off, you suffer 2 damage, which sucks. And then they do 2 different effects depending on if you're fast or slow, which is cool. All enemies within range 2 suffer 1 damage, and then you go invisible if you're fast. With an initiative 12 going invisible and then being able to go slow and play late the next turn, because you can control and say, I'm going slow the turn after, and then gain a counter, which is hugely important, and effectively screw stuff up. Now, we're also going to go over the fact that invisibility rules change, so this really largely only protects you, but you can actually use that to your benefit, regardless. In slow mode, however, the cool part is you can mobilize and muddle every enemy within range 2, which is significant. This is actually one of the cards that we played when slow quite a bit because we would try to focus fire some of these other guys, and we could actually get some hard crowd control on some of the melee units with that immobilize. Even if it costs, suffering 2 damage, just preventing multiple enemies from being able to actually take their attack actions during their turn ended up equating to way more than 2. Especially, we play this a lot when we were doing the fighting Algox, and Algox, even level 1, hit so hard. We drew a little calculated strike on one scenario. I think it was an elite and a non-elite Algox that couldn't attack. So that's 9 damage that could potentially be drawn on average. That was just goodbye with a nice non-loss card. So it equated to 7 health, which 7 health is, again, pretty good for a non-loss level 1. And the bottom's very cool. Move 2, and if you're fast, loot 1 first, which I love very similar to the top of Temporal Displacement. However, the bottom half is very interesting. Slow moves fast. You move 4, but then you immobilize yourself, which isn't a big deal, because you can actually time it effectively if you really need it to. Sand in the Hourglass. Fast, wound 1 adjacent enemy. The next, all wounded enemies suffer 2 damage. Depending on who you have in your party, this actually can be pretty significant. And then you swap dark to light and light to dark if they are in play. That last part didn't really come into play for us, but I think it's an interesting element. I know, no pun intended. And the bottom is very interesting. Heal 2, you affect yourself and all adjacent allies. And if you're fast, you can spend a time counter to actually play a card from your hand. Top or bottom, doesn't matter. So this allows you to kind of turn a little bit of action economy, be able to play 3 cards. Now, of course, you're like, well, is this worth it? Because I trade a bottom, but you can actually trade this bottom for another top and still get some healing going around. So ultimately, it's actually a pretty strong card. And also sometimes you just need an extra action on command. So you're like, this room's gonna screw us up. Hold on, I'm gonna play 2 tops and we're gonna take it out. Borrowed Time. So here's the cool part. This allows you to effectively change your slow turns into a benefit. You would suffer a penalty from being slow, instead move this counter over and immobilize an enemy. I actually slept on this a little at first and I kind of regret because there's times where you can take slow turns and then just say, you literally use this as a tool and say, hey, that guy over there, we're gonna mobilize him and just take guys out of the equation. Well, you can finish off and say, let's focus fire this guy. We're just gonna hard control it this turn, and then next turn, let's all jump on it. And that allows us to play more tactically, especially allowing the blink blade to play his slow turns to hard crowd control, and then his next turn be able to go fast and do really cool stuff. And I feel bad that I was like, oh, I'm not sure I like this card. I do now. Whoops. But yeah, this one we actually tested on really early on, and I've clearly come around on it. And the bottom half's very interesting too, because it's one of those where it doesn't do a passive effect. Both of them are very different. So the bottom half, all your allies suffer -1 move for this round. But then you move equal to twice the number of allies. So pair this with a bone shaper, watch how far you can sprint. And the interesting part of slow is all allies, you don't get to move at all, but all of your allies get to add +1 to all their movements this round. We've used that quite a bit. Actually, the interesting part is with summons, you can really use that to position them. Not only that, but with that 2 and 32 initiative, you can really use that to, I mean, first off, a 32 on slow mode is actually pretty fast for slow, so keep that into consideration. Now we're getting into the higher level cards. So let's get into it. Systems Reboot is the first level 2 card. It's a loss that, interestingly, recovers a lost card. So heal 4 self and gives you a lost card back. So this actually isn't super great at level 2. However, later, it ends up being better because you can kind of play some of the higher level losses and get them back to play them again. Although I'm not a huge fan of the Blinkblade's losses, I like a lot of the non-loss cards. It's not necessarily as significant as I thought it would be, but it's still a pretty strong card. And the bottom half is great. Again, remove all your negative conditions and then move 2 or 4 if you're fast. Removing all your negative conditions is significant because there's several Blinkblade cards that say, hey, oops, as part of this, you're going to poison yourself or you're going to muddle yourself or so on and so forth. So this allows you to undo those and still have some mobility from playing a bottom half card. Reckless Augmentation is also great. You suffer 1 damage and gain an experience, which is fine. However, it's a slow card that gives you attack 3, which isn't necessarily great, but fast, attack 5 pierce, which is very, very strong, and on an initiative 10, no less. This allows you to give a very good attack at a very good initiative and fast for just a level 2 non-loss. The bottom half's also pretty strong because move 3, while fast, you suffer a damage. Ward self, which is huge. Ward, where is it? Ward, we've had some bad luck with Ward, where it really is only, we're like, oh, we're gonna ward a big hit, and enemies tend to draw crappy for us, so they usually it'll stop 3 damage or something. There's people who've had better luck with Ward, but let it be said that this is being able to at least stop 2 or 3 damage is still a very good thing. Level 3 card, Make It Count. So interestingly enough, heal 1, range 3, target 3 is interesting. I like the slow version though, Bless Yourself, which is huge. I know you're only tossing out some heal 1s, but the Blinkblade that can actually put in some really big attacks, being able to non-loss Bless Yourself and keep that cycle going is something that we found to be pretty great. Fast allows you to heal more, which is great. However, instead of range 3, target 3, it's range 2, target 2. But still, heal 3 on 2 targets is still very, very, very strong. The interesting part is the bottom half is also something I'm a big fan of. You get to move 1 if you're fast, which isn't necessarily significant, but there are some cards that really pair well with it from the crafting shop, which I can't talk about. But you get a nice attack 2 that wounds or muddles, depending on if you're fast or slow. I do tend to lean towards double time though, instead. So it's an attack 3, attack 2, move 2, which is very similar to a level 1 card, which isn't great, or attack 2, move 2 if you're slow. Again, not super great. However, the bottom half is super interesting. It's a loss, but the next 3 turns while fast. Activate all fast bonuses twice. If you are a Johnny and you think of how can I break this, the answer is there's so many ways to break it. Like the idea of the things that says, hey, you get +2 attack while fast, or all enemies do blank damage and stuff. You can imagine doubling everything and suddenly the whole world, it's actually incredible. Now, it also gets better later when you get things that start to add more targets when you're in fast. So to say, instead of +1 target, +2 targets becomes really incredible. Now, that's in a higher level card. We'll talk about that shortly, but it's one of those where at level 3 it seems pretty good, but it scales very well at level. Precision Timing's an interesting loss. 2 experience is pretty standard for a perma loss, but you get +1 to all your attacks when you're slow, which is great because your slow form tends to have attack penalties. +1 to all your moves when you're fast. Which is fine. Ultimately, I actually picked the other card for this every time I played the Blinkblade, but so it sounds neat, but I didn't actually get to test this. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst. The bottom half's weird. If you're slow, move 2, move 1, which isn't necessarily great. And however, if you're fast, move 2, attack 2, move 2, and get an experience. So that's pretty good for a non-loss. It's just a lot of movement. Potential energy is kind of what I like, because it gives you the benefit of having super slow turns. So potential energy is attack 2 plus X, where X is the number of time counters you have. So the problem becomes here where you have to store a bunch of time counters, and often you want to burn them. And the move is the same, move 2 plus the number of time counters you have. This allows you to get a bit of time counters, play them, and then it ends up being a pretty decent card, allowing you to do something effective during your slow turns. It's not necessarily, you're like, oh, I could build up a ton of time counters and then use these things, and it sounds great in theory, but ultimately it's a waste of time counters to spend a bunch of turns building it up from 0 and then using this. It doesn't actually pan out there. It sounds great, and you have to use special cards to get it up to 5 time counters, and then what do? You get it up to whatever number. It sounds really great in theory, but it ends up just being good. I mostly just use it because it allows you to actually have very quick moving slow turns, so you can spend the fast turns doing cards that have attack or other things as part of the bottom action, so you can do as much damage as you can during your fast turns. And this kind of enables that. Breakneck Speed, this is a fun card. So at the start of the next 4 rounds, you suffer 2 damage. Boo! And then you get to play 3 cards, and you get to pick 1 for initiative, and you have to play at least 1 top and 1 bottom. But get this, you sacrifice 1 turn, 1 top half, 1 half turn, to get 4 bonus turns. You will burn out faster, but you will be playing so many more cards. And you can pair this by trying to get more time counters, build up some time counters, play this, especially you can play this on a slow turn anyway, and then just start slamming through those time counters, do fast action, and start clearing a room. This is one of those things that really rewards players that know, like, all right, we're ready to go fast and we're gonna kick some ass. And this card really enables that. And the bottom half is super great. Teleport 5, which is great. I love it. And if you're slow, you suffer 2 damage, but that's not a significant thing. But Teleport 5, it doesn't matter fast or slow, it's huge. Flashing Flurry, which I really like. Slow is weird because it's an attack 2 and a cone, or if you burn an element, attack 3 and a cone, which is, again, comparative to a level 1. But that's in slow mode. In fast mode, you actually get an attack 3 at range 3, targeting 2 different things, or targeting 2 at attack 4 in fast, which ends up being really incredible. You need to have elements in play, so you might need allies that can provide that for you. You do have a couple of cards that generate elements, so you might have to play those first. However, I do end up liking it. I lean a little bit towards Breakneck Speed, but the bottom half is very interesting. Flashing Flurry's bottom is a loss. Stun everything next to you, which is great, and then gain a time counter equal to the number of enemies you stunned. So if you position yourself to where you're about to surround yourself with enemies, then stun them all, gain a bunch of counters, and then get a bunch of fast turns out of that. It actually ends up being quite a bit of effort. So if I like actually playing that, even though clearly Breakneck Speed's 333 initiative is incredible, this initiative isn't great. However, that loss is situationally very good, and the top is actually pretty strong. I think the top's almost a little behind a level 5 non-loss, but we'll give it that. Stab them all. So this is another card where it's attack 2, attack 1, 1 slow, or attack 2, move 2, attack 2, move 2, attack 1, all fast. It's fun. Clearly slow doesn't actually penalize your attack, so you can actually just stab 1 person many times, but if you're fast, you can stab multiple people. Your Blink Blade modifier deck can actually get pretty incredible, so this could be pretty good. It's a strong card. It's also a fun card. I think ultimately people just like drawing lots of modifier cards. It's one of those where you can pair it with some of the Blink Blade cards that say all of your attacks this round gain this, like gaining Pierce or something. So this can actually really get much more buffed up, but you kind of have to pair it with the right card. So this next one kind of reminds me of like an Overwatch or Set Against Charge. So for the rest of the round, if an enemy that's not adjacent to you moves next to you, you get to attack 2 of them for free. And then The cool part is, it doesn't matter what the other one, you get a cool benefit. So you get to then move 3, so you can position yourself to make enemies move towards you, which is great. Or if you're in slow mode, you can ward yourself, because if an enemy's moving to you, they might also be attacking you. So this has benefits for both slow and fast, depending on how you're positioned, and the initiative's also incredible. Again, fast at 4 allows you to at least stab, run out, and then if they move back to you, stab them again. So you'll be, I guess, as the card indicates, stabbing them all. The Knife's Edge is terrible to play on slow. It's attack 3 wound and suffer 1 damage if you're slow, which is terrible for a level 6 non-loss. Again, this is one of those where you could do it, but why? You do suffer 1 damage for every enemy targeted while fast, but then this allows you to attack 3, wound all adjacent enemies, which is very strong. Also allows you to dump like power potions or other things that say for all attack actions for this, and since it's a non-loss, it's pretty strong regardless. But this is another one of those good candidates if you can get yourself surrounded by enemies, slap them, and then you can always clearly use other actions to move the hell away, because you probably just took some damage. You clearly did. The bottom half allows you also to get a nice heal for self, non-loss, and then if you're fast, you actually get to move 2 after that. This is one of those cards, again, the initiative's shit on it, but you have so many fast initiatives that ultimately you can bail yourself out. Going into level 7, we have Phasing Blades, a loss, Pierce 3 on all your attacks, which is incredible because there's so many enemies that have like shield, and you're like, ugh, we're fighting shielded enemies this scenario. At the very least, this allows you to bring a super good utility saying, hey, don't mind me, I'm gonna chop them all up, because the Blink Blade totally can, especially if with Pierce 3, a lot of the enemies don't actually get to shield 4 very often in Frosthaven. So this kind of allows you to just kind of destroy them, and this is fantastic. So for the whole scenario, you can rest easily. However, you're like, well, that's a big condition, so the bottom half certainly must be good, right? So the bottom half is move 4 or move 3. And then if you end this movement next to 3 or more enemies, you get a free time counter, which is huge. So this allows you to possibly spend less turns while slow, spend more turns while fast, more turns getting experience, but you have to position yourself around more adjacent enemies, which is actually totally doable. Some of the scenarios where they're high point value enemies, like the Algox are actually 1.5 each, it's harder to get yourself surrounded by 3, and it also feels a bit dangerous. There are several scenarios like with Ruined Machines where you can just surround yourself by them and then slap them all. So this is a pretty strong card, and ultimately it's really good to have a conditional loss with a very strong bottom. Rushed to the end. So attack 4 or attack 5 while fast. Not necessarily great, but you can actually burn a time counter to make this an attack 7 or an attack 8 and gain 1 or 2 experience. So this is a pretty good non-loss. I'm not sure I actually like it necessarily that much, but it allows you to have some on-command burst high attacks if you can afford to burn, time counters. So, and the bottom half is actually really great. You and an ally get to move 4. However, if you're slow, you move 2 and your ally moves 6. This allows you to really reposition. Also, we noticed this with the Banner Spear, where we actually had the dropping the banners and being able to ally move one of the banners 6 is significant. Quantum Uncertainty is super fun. So it's an attack 5, which is not super great for a level 8, but wait, there's more. The slow is terrible. Any crits you draw this round become nulls, which is awful. But then the fast is, of course, the opposite. Any nulls you draw are crits. So this effectively null-proofs your deck and allows you to crit more often. So it's an attack 5 with the potential for more often attack 10s. And the bottom half is a nice move 3 or move 2 and slow. And you get a cool benefit. You either move 2 and strengthen yourself, which is great when slow, because that's actually a pretty strong turn for slow, or move 3 and invisible self. Non-loss invisibility in Frosthaven is still very strong, so ultimately between a strong top and a strong bottom, this is quite the contender. And the other level 8 card, Fastest Alive, attack 2, target 3, muddle, 1 experience is still strong, but then fast, you actually get to attack 4 instead for all of those that are not performing in a move ability this round, which is conditional, but there's still plenty of cards that, it depends on what you're fighting. There's several enemies that actually have non-movement cards in their deck, at least more than one, so this can sometimes get that. And you can, again, muddle target 3 enemies. It actually has a lot more effort than it can put out than you think, especially if you give so many enemies disadvantage to attack you. And the bottom half is hilarious. A move 4 or a move 8 if you're going slow or fast. Combined with the fact this is an initiative 1, it's the fastest initiative you can go in the game, and I mean, as the card indicates, fastest alive, it should give you that. So, and move 8, which is incredible for a non-loss. So I still favor Quantum Uncertainty for level 8, but this one's still a very fun one as well. Reverse the Flow is the first of our level 9 cards. So for the rest of the round, all of your moves can become attacks instead, yay, of the same value. This should look familiar. The Brute has a similar card, and then you immediately perform one of the cards in your discard for its bottom action. Now there's plenty of cards that you can play that are high movement that you can turn into high attacks. So this ends up being such a significant amount of damage, especially if you're in fast mode, and you can actually pull out some of your high fast moves, especially like Fastest Alive, which is a move 8. So now you can perform that as an attack 8. And combine that with another high move, you can actually burst out a lot of damage. So this ends up being kind of a boss killer, because not only that, but you can stand potion to get this back. It's not a loss. So you can just get this back, try them again, and just keep playing, or even short rest if you really need a bunch of on-command damage. And the hilarious part about the bottom, teleport to a starting hex, heal 10 self, and then recover 2 lost cards. You lose it, but it's hilarious because the top is already great. It allows you some strong potential. And then boom, reverse the flow, you start to the beginning. It's effectively like restarting the scenario almost, which I guess reverse the flow. Very similar to what Tracer's ability from Overwatch, if people still play that, where you get to start way back to the beginning, heal a bunch, and potentially catch back up to people, which you probably can because you're the Blink Blade and have a shit ton of mobility. Fractured Timeline is hilarious. You spawn a monster and it's your friend. The monster it's a normal version of the monster, except for the standee number doesn't get copied, and it operates as an ally to you and enemy to all of the monsters. So you effectively you play a Pokemon battle, you get to capture whatever Pikachu you're fighting, create your own version of it, and then boom, it's yours. Of course it's a loss, but still, a level 9 allows you to copy whatever enemy you're fighting. Can really, I know it's just a normal version, but it can actually be pretty significant. And not only that, but the bottom half is a nice teleport 7 non-loss. And of course you take 2 damage while slow, it's still, even while fast, teleport 7 still pretty strong. So now that we've seen all the Blink Blade cards, finally, are any of your favorites? Let us know in the comments below. Here's a special thank you to all of our Inox patrons, and a thank all of you for watching.